All right, welcome in. It is Friday. It's time for Full Court Press. I was just talking off air with Rob Vino. Whoever's in charge of the Missouri Valley deserves a raise. Thanks to the Missouri Valley, we have 9 college basketball games on Friday night. Listen, I know there's a big football game on Sunday. You can't tell me that, I don't care. We've got UConn St. John's. That is a smart move by the Valley, Rob. They kind of got center stage tonight. They would get lost in the shuffle tomorrow. But everyone's playing. I think it's a great move by the conference. So we're going to talk quite a bit of Valley basketball. But first, the undisputed feature game here, no question about it, is at Madison Square Garden tonight. Your boy will be there, meeting some of my college buddies down in the city this weekend. So looking forward to that. Huge game in the Big East, Rob. UConn St. John's. And as I'm getting ready for the show, I was thinking, I know Rob Vino loves his comp games. That's something you bring up all the time, which I think is you do a phenomenal job of finding a game that was comparable to the one we think we're going to see tonight. And I'm sitting there making my notes, and Rob, I think I was at the comp game for this game earlier this year when UConn went to Newark to play Seton Hall. Because for me, going back to that game, Seton Hall was down 18 in the second half. They went 1 for 14 from 3, 1 for 15 from 3. But something they did in that game was pressure the heck out of St. John's, turn them over, and suddenly it was a 1-point game in the final minute of the game. If St. John's does that and makes some shots, are they not right in this game? That's kind of where my head is at, UConn St. John's. How are you seeing this one?
Yeah, there's a couple of things here. And I think, Adam, for what it's worth, both of these teams seem to be on stride right now. So a lot of what we saw earlier this year, I don't know that I made it applicable to this. Not necessarily saying that you can't take comp games, because you have to take comp games. You have to see what teams do in matchups against similar styles. So Seton Hall, point well taken. I'm just talking from a perspective of UConn in their non-covering ways. They're escaping games that they should have blown out teams by double digits. That those days seem to be, you talk often about turning the corner into February. It looks like UConn has turned the corner into February with the past 2 blowouts. Now, they're kind of insignificant Big East teams that they defeated, Xavier and Creighton. So we're going to get a real match here. St. John's definitely is not the team that we saw earlier this year. Think back. I mean, it's crazy to think that we've already been doing this show for 3 months. But remember when Rick Pitino was calling Bryce Hopkins too soft beginning of the year, right? Bryce Hopkins needs to learn how to be a little more fit, et cetera, et cetera. Bryce Hopkins has come along pretty well. Great scorer at Providence, fitting the bill here. Rick Pitino has nothing but praise nowadays. I think his favorite player on the team is Dylan Mitchell. Says how wonderful it is to watch him play the entire game because of his basketball intellect. Zuby Ejiofor is a match that Terrace Reed Jr. won't see. And, 99% of the time in any play. So that's a great matchup. And by the way, Terrace Reed Jr., how about his last 20 shots? He's made 19 of them, 95% from the field the last 2 games or 3 games. So Terrace Reed, Zuby Ejiofor, great matchup. Backcourts here, great matchup. I think where UConn, again, I'll go back to it. I think where they win the game is with their depth. Their depth is just so incredible. And St. John's, it's a good starting 5. But in a game that we would expect to be pretty intense, foul trouble is a consideration here. And if it happens to anybody in the St. John's starting 5, it becomes a little bit problematic at that position. For UConn, it's not the same. Starter gets in foul trouble. All right, we'll go to the bench and we'll pull out next guy who could probably start in 95% of the teams in the country. Silas Demery's been great the last few games coming along. We know solo ball protects the ball pretty well. That was an issue that Danny Hurley brought up numerous times earlier this year. We need to protect the basketball. They're doing a better job. Braylon Mullins, of course, wasn't part of the team earlier this year. Ever since he's come forth, I think they've got things figured out cohesive-wise, rotation-wise. Jaden Ross, Malachi Smith. I mean, you go down the list. This team is just deeper. And I think in the end, that's what wins this game for them. It's a very short price, been bet up a little bit here. MSG is not a place that UConn is foreign to. I mean, they do good work in MSG. And you're going to be at the game tonight. And I know it's a St. John's home game, but I would be UConn travels, boy. Say hi to all my UConn brethren while you're there. But they should have a good portion of the stands as well. So it'll be a predominant St. John's crowd. They're going to be the crowd favorite, but UConn's been in these atmospheres. This is tough, Adam. I thought for a long time last night about this game, and I'm thinking, man, I want to take St. John's. And then I thought to myself, no, you can't really take St. John's, Rob, because they're just too – and in the end, UConn's just better. And they're probably – at that time, I was thinking 2 points better because the number was 1.5. Now we're looking at 3 points better. Still probably 3 points better. I think St. John's puts up a heck of a fight tonight. I think they have turned a corner. But I just think UConn has the look of one of those Final Four type teams like we thought they would be in the beginning of the season. So for me, it would be UConn. Total-wise, Adam, I struggled with it because I really think it's going to be defensive in some part. But I also think back to last year, and Rick Pitino made a conscious decision last year at one point to just go extreme tempo. I'm not going to set up against this UConn defense. I'm going to try and get as many cheap hoops as I can. St. John's plays with tempo anyway. So the total to me is a difficult call, but I think UConn's the right side.
Yeah, man, I thought I was going to love UConn in this spot. I bet against St. John's earlier this week with DePaul plus 10.5. I felt like I deserved to cover in that game. I didn't feel like St. John's played good enough to really, deserve to beat them by 12. So in my head, I was already looking ahead. I said, oh, this is going to be a no-brainer on Friday night. Didn't even know that I was going to the game yet. So I was just like, no-brainer Friday night. I'm going to be on UConn if the number is right. I started to make my calculations. I kind of surprised myself a little bit when my math was all said and done. I was only at UConn -2. So I think that surprised me somewhat. I thought I would be like further off of what the opener was. The opener was pick. So it's one of those things. Hopefully WagerTalk's not trying to clip this breakdown because this is going to be we're going to ride the fence about us as, it's not going to be a very good betting breakdown, but I kind of lead UConn at the opener. It got up to 3. I don't know if this touched 3.5 some places. I could see folks wanting to make a case for St. John's at that key number. I'll go back to what I think this game might be. I think this game is could be similar to that UConn Seton Hall game. But here's the thing, Rob, if St. John's isn't able to force the turnovers, and the other thing, I'll go back to that particular game, UConn did not shoot the ball well. So there's two things right there, right? If UConn can handle St. John's pressure, and if UConn is putting the ball in the basket at a higher rate, which means, their screen action is working, they're getting the open looks, they're knocking them down, maybe they're getting second chance points, they're scoring that way, then it's going to be tough for St. John's to win this game. What I can't figure out about St. John's, and I think we'll learn tonight, Rob, is this team good or are they just beating up the bad Big East? Yeah. That you know what I'm saying? Like, because here's the thing, their 8-game win streak, we've talked about this sort of ad nauseum on the show, how bad the Big East is this year. There's no one even close to these two teams right now. And what I can't figure out, and the reason I probably won't bet this game, is St. John's closer to UConn or are they closer to the rest of the Big East teams that they're playing? That's the tough part. That's the challenge. And that's probably why I don't think I'll bet this game, because I truly don't know. Because I go back to the DePaul game. I say, you know what? St. John's wasn't 12 points better than DePaul. They got a couple calls. Once again, they got more calls than DePaul. I was at the first meeting between St. John's and DePaul. Felt like St. John's got every call. Felt like that earlier this week. And then DePaul had like a 7-minute scoring drought. If you take that out, it was a pretty even, relatively even game. So if that's the type of game you're going to play, UConn, theoretically, you play like you did against DePaul on Tuesday, UConn should crush you, in my opinion. Because I'm with you, Rob. I still think UConn might be an elite team that got a little bit bored and started playing down to their competition. So it's a really tough one. Final thing I'll say about St. John's, I think their shot selection has been much better. If you look at their like offensive numbers, the field goal percentage is good, and the percentage of threes that they've hit is pretty good. And I never considered this a great shooting team, right? That was kind of the downfall of St. John's, I think, at times last year, was the inability to hit shots. And, they're top 100 3-point shooting. From the field, they're 118th nationally, 46.3% from the field. Statistically, they match up on the boards with UConn. So there's a chance this is a pretty good game. I have no clue who's going to win. So that's, again, I hope WagerTalk's not clipping this one. Because if someone watches this standalone outside of the show, they're going to be like, what is this garbage right here? But listen, sometimes you just reason it out and you can't end up on a side. I think that's what we just did.
Yeah, and I'll say one thing that you just said there that is probably the most factual of all is that we're going to find out about St. John's, right? St. John's is going to give their absolute best effort. Whatever that team has is what you're going to see tonight. And if it's not good enough, let's say it's not within 8-9 points of UConn, then we know St. John's is, you could always get a good bracket and go a Sweet 16, but you're going no further. And where UConn's concerned, if they win this game by 8 or 9, you automatically say they took the absolute best St. John's has to offer, won by 8 or 9. They are legit Final Four. I think, again, so much of this revolves around depth to me. We'll see how it goes, but there's not many teams in the nation. Arizona, Michigan I don't even know about Michigan. I think UConn's probably quality depth-wise the deepest team in the country. When Danny Hurley can look to the bench and say, if I put you in, there's no significant drop-off. If I put you in at small forward, you at shooting guard, you at center, it just doesn't matter. I guess center's a little bit of a drop-off, but not totally significant. You get my point. I don't know that St. John's has that. They're going to have to play outstanding basketball the entire game, and no question about it.
And one final point, I don't disagree with Bayou here in the chat. He says, UConn typically slow and efficient on offense. Both, St. John's is, in my opinion, their whole game plan has to revolve around defensive pressure, trying to force turnovers. If it's a tight sort of battle in that regard, I could kind of see it staying under too. I think that comp game, if you will, that UConn Seton Hall game from earlier this year would have stayed way under 144. I think that was like low 60s that was decided in. So if you subscribe to that theory at all, maybe the under, just in the interest of giving a pick here in case WagerTalk does decide to clip this one, Rob, I need to be on record not just saying flip a coin. So I'll ride with Bayou. I think under would be like the way to probably play it.
Well, you know what? I'll make WagerTalk regret clipping this because I'll negate that and say the only reason why I wouldn't play under is what I said earlier. Yeah. Unlike Seton Hall, St. John's will get out and go. And I just think that's part of Pitino's game plan tonight. You can't just come down and let UConn set up half-court defense.
That's true.
And think you're going to win. You've got to get those. When Ejiofor gets a board, it's got to be a kick out and go when they have the opportunity. And that would scare me off of playing under here. Because UConn does have a tendency to get caught up in that stuff. They think they can run too. They can. They just don't choose to. So I'd be the total's in a spot where I'm nervous. Let's put it that way.
Looks like the only money I'm going to have invested in that game is probably a $20 Madison Square Garden beer. Yeah, that's probably how that's going to go for me. All right, let's go to Garth in the chat. Where's the rest of the Ivy today? What are these teams doing? Why is the MAC? Why is everyone giving up the Friday night slot? I don't understand it. There should be. I get you'd have to play early on Super Bowl Sunday, but there should be 20 games tonight. 25. What are we doing? Anyway, the games that are being played, props to the teams that are going to come out, give us a few basketball games tonight. Two of those teams are Yale and Brown. It looks like it's our only Ivy game of what used to just be Ivy Friday, right? Like Ivy was always play the Friday, Saturday. And I think they will get back to that. I just don't know why everyone was scared off this weekend. Garth says Yale Brown, looking at Brown team total under 62.5. Well, if you've listened to anything I've said about Brown this year, then under 62.5 would make some sense. This is a team. I thought that they probably regressed as much as any team in the Ivy, especially from an offensive standpoint. Of course, last year, Rob Vino, Keno Lilly was one of the best players probably in the history of the school. He really sort of drove that offense. And without but this is all known, right? Like without him this year, what they brought back, Brown was never going to be a very good team this year. Not like they've been in the past years where the one year Brown Yale, if you remember, Rob, they were like a minute away from going to the NCAA tournament, upsetting Yale in the final of Ivy Madness to steal the tourney bid. Yale ended up getting it done. I believe that was the year that Yale ended up beating Auburn in the NCAA tournament. So I guess we're thankful for that, because I think they, if that happened, they would have deprived us of a nice NCAA tournament upset. This year, Brown 1-6, predictably the worst team in the Ivy, in my opinion. What I'm a little surprised at, though, Rob, I thought Yale was going to just sort of steamroll this league this year. I thought there was a scenario where Yale maybe didn't lose a conference game, and now they've already lost 2. So Yale comes in off of, last week they lose to Harvard by 2. Again, not a huge. I think Harvard's pretty good, and they're finally like realizing their, sort of ability with that roster, something I thought would have happened sooner. So I don't think that's necessarily a terrible loss for Yale, though they were an 11.5-point favorite in that game and they lose at home. So my thing here, first thing I see, if Harvard was an 11.5-point dog, Brown's only a 14.5-point dog. To me, there's a way bigger gap between those two teams than 3 points. So the way I would look at it, Rob, is I'd lay it with Yale minus 14.5. I think they might vent some frustration, but I'll ask you, does that also correlate with the way Gart's looking at this for the under?
Well, he's specifically looking at team total under, right? And I would agree with that. Yeah, because I do think Yale could break loose here. A quick check back at that game against Harvard. Harvard did what Harvard does best to a team like Yale, just grind it down to a 58 possession game where Yale doesn't get a lot of shots at the hoop. I think there was 103 field goal attempts total in that particular ball game. Slow them down. Harvard and Tommy Amaker have more weapons defensively and offensively than Brown does. And Yale at home in the second, this is kind of it's not a back-to-back because they're not playing one day after the other, but it's their second consecutive home game. And when you're a team like Yale and you come off a home upset loss, generally the bounce back is in full swing here. Somebody's got to pay the price for that 67-65 loss, and Brown is likely that team. Their best defense is their, somewhat methodical nature. And I don't know that they're good enough. They're not, to your point, they're not Harvard in the extent where they can execute that game plan that Harvard did, right? Brown can't execute the let's slow Yale down, let's make some shots on our end for, keep the game close and put Yale under some pressure at the end of the game. Brown can't really do that. They're not a shot-making team. They're not a great defensive team. Yale threes probably go down here tonight like they didn't go down the other night. So I'd be with you here. I was a little shocked at the number moving downward off the opener. A little bit of respect for Brown. Total here has come up 0.5 point. The only reason why, and I think Garth is right for probably isolating Brown under, is because I think Yale might find their way to 80 in this game, which would probably put the full game total in jeopardy of going over. So he's probably on the right side of that. I couldn't disagree. I see, 62.5 pretty solid across the board here. So like the play, like your idea that Yale should come out and smoke this team. I could see something in the, 79, 60, 61 vicinity, something like that. Yale should be pretty good here.
I'm going to pull up Steve Duke's comment because I feel like he summarizes my thoughts in this. He says, Yale can easily cover this, but I don't want to lay 14.5 with an Ivy League squad. It's just, sports aren't why you go to these schools. I disagree with that part a little bit. I think, I think they draw the type of talent they draw. Yeah, probably academics, but Yale's been getting elite players to come to that school for a while. But the point is, it's like my number was right on. I think I was at 15 point. Yeah, I'm at 15.7. Can't read my own handwriting. So I guess where it is now, like you could actually get a couple. There's 14 flat out there. That's somewhat appealing. And by all accounts, like Yale should destroy this team. Rob, the number one 3-point shooting team percentage-wise in the country now is Yale, 41.7%. Brown can be like, I guess Brown's best attribute is just being like scrappy. Like they can, what they're going to want to do. So we talked about a Brown game maybe 2 weeks ago on the show when they played Cornell. And I said I gave Cornell, they were like a pick. They won by 100. And I said, Brown can absolutely not play the way Cornell wants to play. They can't play that game. Right. They don't want to play that game. So Brown will do everything in their power to slow this game down. They have to. But then it goes back to almost like the point we made in the first game we talked about. Are you really going to just want Yale to run half-court offense against you that ultimately ends in an open look from three, where they're the number one 3-point shooting team in the nation, 41.7%? Or do you want them to milk 20 seconds off the clock running half-court offense and then get to the line where they hit 78.2% as a team, 11th in the country? Like, they shoot 50.1% from the field. To me, there's just no way Brown, like, how does Brown hold that down for 40 minutes? So, I guess the more I talk about it, the more that 14 looks appealing. I think if I had like another point there, because again, I especially with a big number for me, I'm looking for at least a 2-point discrepancy. If I'm at 15.8, I'd love to get like 13.5 or 13 to make a bet for clients. But when you factor in the spot and the fact they come off the loss to Harvard and the fact they might kind of be inclined to maybe, make an example out of someone, for lack of a better term, that 14 is doable in my opinion. So I'll lean pretty strong to Yale minus 14.
Yeah, and just to counter what Steve Dukes was saying there, remember yesterday, Adam, somebody came in the comment section, I forget who, made a valid point. Yeah, but such and such is 1-in-6 ATS. I forget what the exact situation was, but when I looked at it, I said, yeah, but the other side is 0-4, their last 4 home games or whatever. So what do you want? Do you want the 1-6 or do you want the 1-4? Which hand grenade do you want to step in front of? It's kind of the case here. Afraid to lay 14.5. But up until Harvard, Yale's 3 previous home games, they won by 34, 17, and 15, all more than what you're asked to give here. So laying 14.5 with Yale at home shouldn't be scary at all, since they've only played 4 home games and they've won by more than 14.5 3 of the 4 times. And again, I would say that Brown wants to do what Harvard did. Brown just can't execute it. Brown just doesn't have the same personnel, and therefore it probably falls short here because, like I said earlier, somebody's got to pay the price for that Yale loss at home the other day. Yeah. And it probably is Brown.
All right, let's move it along. We will recap yesterday real quick. Really good day for both of us for client plays. 6-1. You went 3-0. I went 3-1. I know some people probably got hooked on I like Santa Barbara. I guess if you got in late, you might have missed that. But that was an unfortunate. If you were on UC Santa Barbara yesterday, that was tough because Miro Little got scratched like before that game. So that really changed things for them. Unfortunately, I know he had been dealing with some injuries. I had no idea he would be out yesterday. So if you were on Santa Barbara, like the side, that's a tough beat because obviously it would have been a much different handicap knowing Little was not going to play. We ruined the parlay with a Wilmington money line. That was a nice result for William and Mary. I didn't expect them to roll into Trask and get the win, but they did in very impressive fashion. So, Rob, we'll go 2-teamer today because we know we're going to fire a 3-teamer tomorrow with Kelly. The promo, same thing as usual. Rob and I have both been seeing it well. Rob had a great start to the season. I'm sort of trying to make up for lost time after struggling November, December. But I won in January. I'm off to a great start in February. And you can get both of our picks on the double, the Firepower, CBB, 3-day all-access package. Which is up on both of our pages. And because it's Friday, Rob, it is the weekend package officially, because it's officially the weekend. Last I checked, Friday morning. So, You never know anymore because now we do a show 6 days a week. So the weekend has been, the weekend has been altered, but that's okay. Love going can't wait to go rapid fire with Kelly Stewart when there's 155 games tomorrow from a hotel or from my, I think I'm staying in Jersey tonight, and then I'm staying at I was gonna stay at my friend's house tonight, and I was like, I might need the hotel studio space. I might need to quiet from like 5 a.m. until we go on that show because there's a trillion games because we've decided to play nine games tonight, and then the rest of the planet is playing tomorrow. But hey, that's what we live for, Rob. 155 games on a Saturday. It gives us time to really dig into these Friday games, though. I'll throw one out. I'm going to the chat has noted my generosity with some of the client plays on the show, but I've said every day it's not going to like devalue the package or what I have for sale because my volume's gone up significantly. I actually think me personally upping the volume a little bit has helped the results for me. So I'm going to continue to do it. So it makes it so I don't really mind coming on and sharing one of my plays because I know I'll probably get to the window with more than one, even on a night where there's only 9 games. So let's talk Dayton VCU. This is going to be my leg of the parlay. I'm going to jump in with the Dayton Flyers right here. Reluctantly, of course, Rob. Reluctantly, I don't think this team is what we've all come to know Dayton as over the last few years, where it's like a perennial contender in the Atlantic 10. But I do still think where I think the sort of mindset is a little bit off is I still think Dayton is a capable team. And we may talk about it like a Loyola Chicago later in the show where they're underdogs, but they're not good at all. And they're just underdogs because they're bad. Dayton is an underdog here because they're at the Siegel Center in Richmond, Virginia, which is a phenomenal place. I actually got to go to the Stew, I think they call it. Is the Stewart Siegel Center, Richmond, Virginia, home of the VCU Rams. I got to go on a Friday night a couple of years ago with my buddy Aaron Kidd. What a place that is. It'll be awesome. No question about it. But yet this is what we came up with yesterday. Never once have I made a bet because it's going to be a really good atmosphere, right? It's just one component of the handicap. I just saw Dayton play in as good of an atmosphere on Friday night in St. Louis last week, Rob. 10,400 screaming fans. It was the biggest crowd St. Louis has had in a while. The students were awesome. So while they lost that game by 30, at least they're primed. At least they just played in a very hostile environment a week ago. I think it's worth noting that St. Louis is an incredible team and played as efficient of an offensive game that they could possibly play in that game. So I'll give Dayton a pass for that. Here, I guess for me, Rob, I just don't see VCU being able to run it up on Dayton, from an offensive standpoint, enough where they're just for sure going to cover 7. Dayton, I think, will probably sit in a zone and force VCU to shoot the ball against them. Now, VCU's got some shooters, but they've also struggled with zone at times. So for me, it's going to be an all or nothing type game, right? Because Dayton's going to sit in the zone. Dayton's going to let them shoot some outside shots. VCU can shoot the 3. So if VCU's just ripping it from 3, this one, they might get up and we might be trying to claw back from double digits. But this is still a Dayton team that has redeeming qualities, in my opinion. They're not the best team in the A10, but they're still a capable team. You're giving me 7.5. They have a little bit of what I consider positive momentum, even though they didn't cover earlier this week. To get that win over the Bonnies gives them some momentum. I think the Flyers are going to give us a game tonight. So I'll take Dayton plus 7.5. 4% play for me, and that's going to be my leg of the parlay.
Yeah, and I'll agree with that, Adam, because, again, we only had 9 games. Had a lot of time to think about this one as well. When you think back to just last Friday night when you were at St. Louis opens 12. The money pours in on Dayton to the point where it's only 9. St. Louis at home -9. They, of course, run Dayton out of the building. But here, money takes the opposite approach, or excuse me, they take the opposite approach. They go anti-Dayton against VCU. Game opened 6.5, excuse me, now up to 7.5. 7.5, almost the same as the St. Louis 9. And as we just talked about with UConn and St. John's, there's such a gap between St. Louis and the rest of the A-10. It's kind of crazy. Like VCU, they're closer to the rest of the pack, to put it in your terms, than they are to St. Louis. So the opportunity for Dayton is here. I wouldn't expect them to get blown out, and certainly not blown out with the immediacy that they got blown out by St. Louis with. Right, the game was over before it even started, before you have a chance to even sit down and eat a pretzel or something. The game's over. So here, I think they come in. I think they play. This is more to their, what do we call that? Their weight class. This is more to Dayton's weight class, I think, tonight with VCU. Even though VCU under Ryan Odom has been good, even though VCU plays a similar style to St. Louis, where they want to get out and go, but they're nowhere near the defensive teams. The perception that we have of VCU over the last, 20 years would be the havoc defense that Shaka Smart brought to them years ago. They're not that style team anymore. They're not that good defensively. They used to be really, really good. They don't force the same amount of turnovers. They don't play you as tightly as as being glued to your man-to-man opponent. It's not the same. So Dayton's going to have opportunity to score here. I think Anthony Grant's team, after being embarrassed on the road last week, probably has a pride factor to them. Again, we're not trying to – I don't think either one of us is trying to prop Dayton up as a really good team. I'm just saying that I think they're closer to VCU, certainly, than they were to St. Louis. And the points they're getting are just about the same. I mean, 7.5 and 9 are really close. So for me, plus 7.5 would be a take here. Let's go get them. Let's win that leg of the parlay.
Yeah, and let's look at some of what VCU has done of late, right? They only beat Fordham by 4 over the weekend. Didn't shoot the ball particularly well. They beat Richmond, who's a solid team this year, by 8 at home. It's a big rivalry game. The St. Joe's game was another home game. They only won by 7. I mean, so this is not. I mean, Ryan Odom's down the road in Charlottesville. I like Martelli. I liked him at Bryant. I was a big believer in what he was doing there, and I think Phil Martelli Jr. is going to be a very good coach. He'll have success here. He's already kind of having success here, but I don't know. This VCU team has more of a mid-major type feel than past years, where it felt like Ryan Odom had, and then his predecessors had, a team that could play with the big boys. And I think I'll go back to the point you made, very I think as good as possible. They're closer to the rest of this league than they are to St. Louis, and maybe even George Mason to an extent. So I'm with you there. It's just a matchup that I think is closer. Someone said my number's right on the money. I made this 5.3. So I've got VCU as a 5.3 point favorite, a little bit more than 2 points of value at the 7.5 number, and a spot that I like. So I'm going to roll with Dayton here.
Yeah. Can I thank you 1,000% before I get ripped in the comment section?
Yes.
For just very calmly pointing out Ryan Odom's down the road in Charlottesville. It is Phil Martelli Jr. I did say Ryan Odom. We get and I'm not trying to make excuses for us, because we pride ourselves on expertise and personnel and coaching and whatnot, but we look at 365 games and we speak off the top of our head on this show. This show, like Adam has said, isn't scripted. So sometimes something like Ryan Odom at VCU is going to, because he was just there last year, is going to come out of my mouth.
Yeah, I had one
correcting me there.
I had one a couple days ago that I noticed after the fact, where I wanted to make a point about Dayton Albury playing in the game last year between Utah State and New Mexico. And I think the way it came out was he played for Eric Olin. And I was just that's clearly wrong. And I'm sure someone could nitpick that, but it's I also have this problem, Rob, where the words sometimes come out of my mouth like faster than I'm thinking them in my head. That's a life problem for me, not just a college basketball breakdown problem. Sometimes I need to think a little bit before I speak. So yeah, that is it happens. We're a lot of times if you like listen to the whole thing, you can figure out what we mean. But yeah, it's all good. It's all good. And with the rate at which these people change, I mean, Jesus, how do you keep track of everything? It's crazy that the way even coaches move around, players. You would need you need like AI listening to this and like spitting it out for you. So there's no other way to keep track of everything. And I don't know how to use. I'm a late adapter there. I have no clue how AI works. Just hoping it doesn't replace me someday. So,
right.
To me, AI is still Allen Iverson, Rob. That's AI to me.
Yeah. Especially in the territory where I'm located. Yeah. The AI will, he could run for governor and win here.
I saw his jersey. I was at the Wells Fargo. It's not even Wells Fargo Center, the Xfinity Mobile Arena. There it is, his jersey hanging up in the rafters. That was if you were growing up, when I was growing up, every kid owned that black Sixers Iverson jersey, the one that's now the throwback, which was the new one back then, and just wanted to be Allen Iverson. Trying to do that crossover. Yeah, incredible stuff. All right, back to the gambling. Let's go to Rob Vino. People are like, Trig, stop talking for a second. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to let Rob take his Belmont Bruins, our first sort of foray into what'll probably be a Missouri Valley show the rest of the way. He said Steve Duke says Belmont versus UIC looks super tricky. UIC's beating some quality rivals there. They might be real. Rob, did I see someone get kicked out of the game for Illinois Chicago the other day? Like, I think they got an ejection and he threw a punch. I just want to make sure I have the right team here because I had this written down. I believe, yes. So this was Elijah Crawford for Illinois Chicago. Played 1 minute against Murray State. I believe he got ejected. I believe he threw a punch. He's 11.8 points per game for the Flames. They already might be up against it at Belmont. So I'd really want to know if he's playing or not. And Rob Vino, will it even matter? Are your Belmont Bruins gonna torch the Flames tonight is the question.
Well, the first time around, it didn't matter because he didn't play in the game against Belmont. Belmont wins 87-84 at Belmont. Tighter game than what was expected there. UIC covers. Adam, you often refer to these as head fakes in the morning. Belmont gets bet down as low as 2.5, and within 15 minutes, they get steamed to 4. So somebody bet it down in order to create an opening and then came back and bet Belmont pretty hard. It's sitting now mostly 3.5s again where it opened. So a little bit of bounce back and forth in this number. Very rarely would I come back with a team off of back-to-back 103-point performances. Belmont's offense, it started last Saturday night at Murray State, where they were double shorthanded. No Sam Orm, no Nick McLean. Nick McLean's been out for like 8-9 games now. But then Orm comes back the very next game and does his thing, and Belmont scores another 103 points. And it just doesn't matter right now in this league who the defense is. Casey Alexander's group, I remember commenting to you off air about this, Adam. In watching Murray State that night, they're so deep. They marched a kid off the bench who had 36 minutes played all season long, and he goes out and knocks down 5 out of 6 threes. It's the system. I know that you met with a guy who told you that Casey Alexander might be the best talent evaluator of a head coach
in the whole game,
not only in
the whole country,
not only mid-major, but the entire country. So he obviously gets these guys. They're a little bit better defensively. They haven't had to be that lately. The obvious question is, if Belmont's hitting shots, can UIC keep up? They did the first time, 87-84, like I say, in Belmont. So you have a little bit of confident revenge factor at home for UIC, where they feel, hey, we only lost by 3 to these guys the first time. And guess what? McLean and Orm both played in that game. So now I tried to look to see when the heck Nick McLean, if he's ever coming back, and they do list him as a guy that's going to play at some point, but probably not tonight. Again, we'll see. We were surprised last night by Miro Little. Could be surprised here by what happens. All that being said, I think Belmont's still the better team. I don't know if UIC can keep up entirely for 40 minutes. My hesitation, one more time, is the fact that Belmont has been so good off. You can't play any better offensively than they played for 80 minutes straight now. That's got to regress at some point, and it could be tonight on the road, regress enough to the point that UIC plays them within 3 again. So I haven't bet it, Adam. I do think Belmont's the right side. I was a little shocked the total came down from 152.5 to 150.5 because Belmont does make you play their style. However, again, even if they don't get 103, Belmont's probably ticketed for 80, which probably makes this game an overlook. So my best advice would probably be look at over in this game, but it's one I haven't bet yet. Like I say, and even the money has bounced around as far as side is concerned this morning.
Yeah, this is a very intriguing game. I believe they flexed this one to the national TV slot. So you've got ESPNU 9:00. Can't remember the last time Illinois Chicago was given like a big national TV home game. So you might have a pretty excited fan base there. Of course, Belmont has become one of the bigger names in this league. So you're probably getting one of your bigger crowds of the year for Belmont anyway. Rob, you make a good point. Like they probably have to regress on the road a little bit. I don't know that there's a team in college basketball this year that has better numbers on the road than Belmont. They're 9-1. They've shot the ball insanely well. Like you're not supposed to, over the course of a season, you're not supposed to play like better than you do at home on the road for that long. For that, like it almost doesn't make sense how efficient they've been away from home. But then again, you go back to just how good this team is. The comment that was made was from someone on the St. Louis coaching staff who's like, that dude might be the best talent evaluator in the whole country. That's Casey Alexander for Belmont. That's I feel like compliments like that are big when they come from like just unsolicited from a different team. And I mean, the guy's 21-3 and all his Belmont teams have done is since they got to the Valley, which was a move up for them, has win games. So for me, like this number was actually right on. I had this right on the money at 3. So yeah, I mean, it got manipulated, maybe bet down a little bit, bet back up to 3. It was still too close for me to really want to go either way. I guess the final thing I'll say about this game, Rob, is, Illinois Chicago, when they played Belmont earlier this year, I don't think they had figured it out yet. Right? Like, I don't think so when they lost to Belmont back on December 13th, which was only a 3-point game, it was part of a 6-game losing streak. And it was part of a stretch where Illinois Chicago had lost 8 of 9, and their only win in that stretch was against a non-D1 team. This team's clearly figured it out a little. And they come off the loss to Murray State in a game where they didn't play that poorly, right? They did not play that bad against Murray State. And that was a tough spot going on the road to Murray State and a team that was just so due for a win. So yeah, I'm like torn on this one. I think my number's right on, but I don't know if I really want to fade Illinois Chicago at home in this spot here either. So tough one for me. I'll probably pretty easy pass on this one for me.
Yeah, it's interesting, Adam. Real quick here, 2011 to 14, my oldest son was at Belmont, and they were in the Atlantic Sun then, and they took over the A-Sun. I remember seeing them play Jacksonville down there at the Curb Center one night, and then they took over that. Then they go to the OVC, which was a step up, and they take over the OVC, and now they move to the MVC, like you say, and they're 11-2 in this league. Now, I didn't think their rise to the top of the league was going to be this quick, but man, you watch them play basketball. It's a good mid-major team. And the one good thing about Belmont this year is they're not great. They're a little bit better defensively than they've been in the past. In the past, they were just like a Swiss cheese matador defense. But here, good enough so that the offense can take over. We'll see how it goes tonight. This is a big test for them. Second week in a row for CBS Sports Network for Belmont. They're making the big time. Or no, you said ESPNU, so even bigger.
All right, Rob, we have time for two more. I want to know, do you know where you want to go parlay wise yet? There's only a couple games to choose from. So go ahead.
I've known since the start, I'm going to stay in the MVC. I'm going to play the Drake, Illinois State game over 144 seems to be the common number now. Guys, if you shop it out there are multiple 143.5s available at big name places. So 143.5. If you're going to tail along here, you can get a better number. Couple of things here, Adam. They played once already, 73-56. Illinois State wins by 17. But Eric Henderson hadn't figured it out yet, and his Drake players hadn't figured it out. And you just use that same sort of angle for the Illinois-Chicago team. But here, it proves out to be true in a couple instances. And let me just start by saying this. From the Illinois State side of this, scoring enough points to get us up and over 144. In that first game, they shot 72% from two-point range, 56% from three-point range, out-rebounded Drake 37-20 by 17. They won the game by 17 and committed 23 turnovers. Who wins a game by 17 committing 23 turnovers? Just about impossible. And to make it even worse, Drake is not a real turnover forcing team, and Illinois State's not a team inclined to turn it over that much. So that was kind of the one-off. If they hadn't turned it over 23 times, they might have scored 90, probably would have scored 90 in that game. Drake is the worst defensive efficiency team in this league. What a contrast to what we've seen out of Drake, the last 3 decades. And now with Eric Henderson bringing his South Dakota State style, they're just a different team. They're a lot better offensively. A couple of things here. In that game against Illinois State, it was their worst shooting game of the year. 34% from the field, 33.9 to be exact. They've shot better than that every game in the MVC other than that one. Jalen Quinn, now the top offensive weapon for Drake, wasn't close to being the top offensive weapon for Drake when this Missouri Valley Conference season started. I give you a split here, Adam. They played 13 games. Drake has. The first 6 games of the Missouri Valley Conference season, Jalen Quinn only scored 76 points, averaged 12.7. That's in 6 games. The last 7 games, that 76 has turned into 190 points over 7 games, averaging 27.1. And it's not skewed because his lowest point total in any of the last 7 games is 21. His highest point total the previous 6 Missouri Valley games was 19. So I'm trying to point out the fact that Eric Henderson's offense that he brought from South Dakota State, he's found his lead. They've all found their proper place in pecking order in this offense. They know how to execute it. He's got his rotations down. It's pretty cohesive. Drake games over the last 10 in Missouri Valley play have gone over this number 8 times, 80% cover over 144. Their effective field, I'm just going to point out some things about Illinois State defensively because their defensive numbers are really, really good. But you go back through their home games, boy, they played the worst of the worst at home so far this season. So the home defensive numbers could be a little bit skewed here. Drake's effective field goal percentage, pace, free throw rate, turnover percentage, they're all better than anybody Illinois State has faced at home this year. So to me, that gives credence to Drake probably finding their way somewhere close to 70 points. If they get to 68, so be it, because I don't think Illinois State's turning the ball over 23 times in this game. And this game happens to be on their home floor, and they got 73 the first time around. I could see something that hits about 146 or better. Here we're only looking at 144. So I'm going to go that route. I'm going to go Illinois State Drake, which has become far more offensive-minded than defensive-minded. I'm going to play this game over 144.
I can't disagree with that. I think Illinois State could score a bunch of points here. I'm actually very tempted to lay the 9 or the 9.5. I was trying to go back in my results. I played this game the first time around I think I laid 4.5 with Illinois State. It was an easy win. That was way back in December, 73-56 final. That was, of course, I will pull up. Bayou makes a good point here that I think is worth pointing out. Owen Larson he is starting to look functional for Drake, which I think speaks to which would help your over, because like he was, in my opinion, he was going to be the best player on this team coming into this year. Now he gets hurt in the preseason. That obviously was not the case because he's coming over from South Dakota State. He comes with Henderson. Really, I think that derailed this whole season because, listen, it's tough to, kind of mesh yourself into a new team, a new environment, and then to do it when you get hurt in the preseason. I think that's why we've seen some guys that transferred end up sitting the year. That, like, CJ Luster comes to mind, where like it was like rumored he was going to be back in January or December. Then it was rumored he was going to be back in January. Then he just decided to call it on the season and take the year. And it's almost like it's really difficult to change schools, change system. Now you miss like a couple months. And I think that's what we saw with Larson when he came back was, he was playing 32 minutes and he was just not very effective. Now he's been far more effective. 4 of the last 5 games, he's been in double figures. And I think that's huge for Drake. It's probably the one thing, Rob, that will keep me off of laying the points with Illinois State, because I just don't know that he's been fully priced into the number for Drake. And so I can't decide. Like my number here is 12 and change. I think it was 12.3. So at 9 or 9.5, like I'm looking at some 9s here for this game. Like that's a big enough edge to get involved with. But I guess my concern is what Bayou brings up, is that he really does make Drake better and they could potentially hang around. The other reason I think that, Johnny Kinzinger just can't hit a shot these days. I didn't see what he did in his last game, but I don't think anyone hit shots for Illinois State in their last game. I believe that was a loss for them. 54-50, only 50 points for Illinois State the last time out. But that, I think, is a lot more. That has more to do with the way Southern Illinois plays, in my opinion, than it does Illinois State not being, great offensively. But I do think it's worth noting that Kinzinger has really struggled to shoot the ball. I mean, this guy was a flamethrower last year, and this year he can't seem to hit a shot. He's when he's on, he's a great 3-point shooter, but this year he's under 30% from 3. You got to wonder if he has the positive regression at some point where, reminds me of Brendan Coyle on Siena, where he was like in a generational shooting slump, and then he saw 1 go in, and then he kept shooting them, and then suddenly 8 went in, and he kind of broke out of it. So that's what I'd be looking to happen with Kinzinger. If he hits a couple early, maybe it's this game. So I lean toward laying the points because I think Illinois State's sort of due to lay it on someone. I think Kinzinger's due to have a big game. But I will happily root for your total and for our parlay, because if Drake contributes at all, Rob, this one should go over the total.
Yeah, they seem like a lot of teams under head coaching changes, Adam. It takes a while to figure things out. And I just think that Eric Henderson's team looks more like the South Dakota State offense that he brought with them nowadays than they did early on. Obviously, Larson helps, but boy, oh boy, the way they've scored points, and especially the way that he's found a pecking order with that rotation finally seems to be paying dividends, at least as far as point scoring is concerned. And they stink on defense. Let's face it. That was one of the teams that Belmont got 103 against. That was the most recent one. Drake got to 90, and it wasn't enough.
All right, Rob, I'm going to let you pick. Missouri Valley, center stage tonight. Let's talk about one of the Valley games we haven't talked about yet. We'll close out the show with that.
You want to go to Murray and Southern Illinois just because it's such a real contrast in styles, who can impose their will on the other side. Southern Illinois, Adam, is a team that, just reading local Missouri Valley articles this season, Southern Illinois is a team where you wonder why, and I don't think Murray State will do this because Murray State isn't known to do this. But the question is, why doesn't every team just come out against Southern Illinois and line up in a zone and force them to shoot from the perimeter and just win the game? Because Southern Illinois probably can't shoot at 2 p.m. shoot around or whatever. It's a question that Murray State's not inclined to go zone, much more of a man-to-man team. But man, if you're coaching against this Southern Illinois team, you probably want to just say, hey, don't let these guys beat us inside. They can't shoot from the outside. They're not a good offensive team to begin with. Murray State really is. We saw them get a little bit of a bounce back their last game, the 4 straight losses, right? And then we talked about the game. They did cover 6.5, won by 7 against Illinois Chicago the other night. Pretty good game, but Murray State really needed it. And they do need to keep stacking them here. Where Murray's concerned, when I watch them, the handful of times that I've seen them full game this year, they're going to score on whoever they play. They're just going to score. It's that simple. They're that good offensively, but they don't mind giving them up either. The question here is, can Southern Illinois, will they score with them? And the first time around, the answer was yes, 84-81, 165 points in that game. And like you say, the second time around from Missouri Valley here was all early December. Now we're where we are. But I could see this game one more time being played Murray State's way. However, 158 to me is just way too high. I just can't trust Southern Illinois to come back with another 80-point performance. As good as they were in that first game, 165 isn't that far from 158. And if shots don't fall for them tonight, I don't think it'll get there. I like the Murray State side. I think I would take that more than anything. Murray State has been bet from pick to -1.5. I can understand it. Southern Illinois is a one-trick pony. If they can't defend and keep you in the 50s, like you just talked about, that 54-50 grinder they just played with UIC, then they can't win. So I'm going to look at Murray State here, -1.5.
Yeah, I think my only problem with that is the way Murray has shot the ball of late, because they even the other day, like that's been Murray State's problem. They have not shot the ball well at all. And I guess you could say, they broke out a little bit against Illinois Chicago, but still 9 for 28 from 3 in that game. I think Murray State, the reason they won that was, they handled the glass. They got to the foul line, scored 16 points from the free throw line. It was a better shooting performance, 46.7% from the field. But if you go back to really the last 3 weeks, Murray State has not shot the ball well. And the reason that's a concern for me is the first meeting way back in late December, they were shooting the ball well. They hit 10 threes in that game. They shot 51% from the field, and they still only won by 3. The question, as someone that was trying to make a case for Southern Illinois, am I really getting enough with that number? And then, of course, the dreaded, and this is what we were saying with Illinois State as well, the dreaded Murray State figures it out night, which is probably coming sooner than later, right? Where they put it all together and have that offensive game we know they're capable of having. And then suddenly, it might be good night. So, yeah, that's going to be an interesting game. I don't think it's the best matchup for Murray State, but it almost feels like one of those situations, Rob, where you had your chance and you don't want to poke the bear, right? Because we know what Murray State, when they're on, you're probably getting run out of that gym if you can't score. And Southern Illinois has shown the ability to, kind of struggle offensively at times. So I think I maybe lean toward the under with you more so than the side. Bayou says that line flip kind of indicates Murray State will light it up tonight. It's coming. Murray State's going to have a game in the near future where they go off. I'll tell you that much. That's probably around the corner. All right, 11 a.m. It's time for us to call it a day. We'll be back 11 a.m. We'll be back 11 a.m.-ish Eastern. We let Gianni go first on the last call show. We'll be rapid fire with Kelly tomorrow in the 11 a.m. slot on last call. For today, the 2-team parlay, Dayton +7.5. It's one of my client plays. Rob's going to go with Drake, Illinois State over 144, your traditional 2-teamer. Let's hit this one, and then we'll be back to fire a 3-teamer with Kelly in Vegas tomorrow. Have a great Friday, everyone. We'll see you guys tomorrow morning.